this end of the SaaS era, whether it's true or not, there's absolutely a shift that is taking place with how software operates and really where those currencies line in.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the man who wishes he could use his frequent flyer miles as open AI tokens, Rich Swire.
That's a good one.
How are we doing today, man?
Good, man.
Yeah, I feel like it was on the nose for the topic today. Sometimes I'm off the reservation, but today we're trying to keep it topical.
I would switch it. I wish I could use my open AI tokens for flying around the world.
You have been doing a lot of travel the last few weeks, so it's good to have you back in Sarasota.
Yeah, man.
So close, yet so far, right over there.
Yeah, we actually, it's funny because we got a nice email from OpenAI saying we've used over 500 billion tokens this year. It's nuts.
Yeah,
that's a lot of tokens.
That is a lot of tokens. I mean, we've done a lot of work.
We probably
too.
should form a group. Tokenist Anonymous.
We all show up at the secret society, right? We all get to talk about what we've done.
I used to just process stuff on 4.0, and then
back in my day, I only used one PDF
and then I started
as reference.
Using 5, and now I've lost my family, my car.
Yeah, you're just scratching at your neck and just.
It's the new currency, man.
Who's got some spares laying around?
It is.
Oh God,
trading tokens I saw some guy on the corner selling tokens.
Yeah, that's the cyberpunk.
That's
the future, right? Yeah.
It's
well, that's actually not what we're talking about today, but kind of what we're talking about today, right?
We're talking about tokens.
Yeah, exactly. There's been this shift away from software. Obviously, we've outlined it a handful of times in different episodes, but I think from one of our recent releases that we really wanted to talk a little bit more about tokens as this new currency for work, right? So I guess we could kind of start with just giving a quick overview. I mean, this end of the SaaS era, whether it's true or not, there's absolutely a shift that is taking place with how software operates and really where those currencies line in. So, we'd love to get some takes there and we'll kind of work through it.
Yeah. I mean, I think anybody's in the software world, or even if you're not in the software world, you've kind of seen a shift over the last 20 years where you're paying a monthly fee for what used to either, cost priced a little bit differently, right? So now everybody's obviously very familiar with like Netflix subscription or Hulu or even your phone. I mean, everything today is monthly subscriptions. And then of course, enterprise software with SaaS, everybody gets charged a monthly fee. And the way that those are kind of typically itemized is by seat. So you have a person who's accessing a user account, and you might have 10 people that use a service, and so you 10 times whatever, $50 a month. And so now you have $500 a month SaaS fees, right? And the logic behind that is that, software, it used to be a pain in the ass to have your own servers, and you have to host your own stuff. And so there was a cost there. And then, having it on premise, you had issues around if it crashed, or you didn't want to have to hire an IT guy to keep up with your patches or make sure it was secure. So obviously these hyperscalers like Google, Amazon, and others saw an opportunity to move everything to the cloud. And then of course, SaaS providers followed through. So there's this massive world called the cloud that has really kind of dominated and now where, 95% of the internet is residing. Right. And so, enter AI, and it kind of does throw a little bit of a wrench in it, because on one side, AI introduces this new kind of entity into the cloud, which is the large language model, where it requires obviously a ton of compute to build, a ton of compute to run. And that's where companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft and OpenAI are spending a ton of money on new chips, new servers, processing this world. But because it's so tied to compute, which is kind of a metered system, it's a lot more like electricity than it is like traditional SaaS. And so the pricing model is kind of pushing more toward usage. But now, if you're tying everything against AI, by de facto, everything has to kind of now have a usage component, right? You can still kind of have a seat licensing, I guess, and some vendors have chosen to have a hybrid model where they charge per seat and then usage on top of that. You've also seen scenarios where they'll give you a little bit of usage with your seat, but if there's overage, then they're going to charge you extra. Typically, like
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft and others are using that kind of model. And then there's a lot of other kind of interesting models that are even beyond the usage of tokens, which is the kind of the way that the large language models meter usage into like outcome based pricing, where it's
Yeah.
like, okay, forget about understanding tokens, and if I can book you an appointment or if I can solve a ticket, I'm going to charge you for an outcome. I don't know how.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
those are more like experimental. I'm not 100% sure anybody's kind of bought into that. If they have, they,
Well, it's kind of like a VA saying, like, instead of paying me, like, give me, money based on every,
yeah,
demo I book you and stuff like that. I don't care if you close it, but
yeah,
it's the work I'm doing. That's what you're paying on, not the seat or the license of,
yeah.
my service.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier when you put a human behind it because it's like contractor work,
Sure.
and salespeople are typically outcome based too. That makes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of sense because you can track it back to that human. But then if you kind of try to correlate that same logic to like a an AI large language model, which may have a
Right.
conversation, may do some things, it gets a little bit hairy because, as you know, not everything is just AI from start to finish. There could be a human in the loop.
Yep.
There's value. What's a closed ticket? Maybe it's still touch tier 2 support, and so do you still pay that vendor for that outcome? So there's like
Yeah, that's
it's just
true.
harder to manage just because it's not human based, right? It's token based kind of thinking, but ultimately, when it comes down to, and this is kind of the premise of the pod, is you know everybody has to shift their mindset to thinking around tokens. And so, just a quick recap of what a token is: essentially, is when an AI model processes a word, which essentially equates to one token, right? For the most part.
Yeah.
So, think of it like a toll booth, where on one side the input, let's say you prompt it a sentence that has, call it 10 words, then AI is going to say, okay, that's 10 tokens. It's going to cost you to process this prompt. And then it's going to go back and do a lot of work. It might hit the large language model, might hit other sources of data. And then the
Mm-hmm.
accumulation of that, and then the output it gives you back is measured in tokens. So maybe the output it
Yeah.
gives back is 100 words as an answer. And
Right.
so, I'm oversimplifying it, but essentially you have to pay for 110 tokens. And tokens
Yep.
are typically very inexpensive to the point where they price it per million. So, on average, a million tokens might cost between, let's call it, I don't know, it depends on what model you use, but it could cost
Yeah.
anywhere between $1 all the way up to $50, depending on reasoning
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. But the point of it is that it's a very complicated thing to wrap your head around when it comes to pricing. Because
Right.
if you're a SaaS company and you're saying, all right, I'm going to release AI into my product, or I'm going to expose it to my customers, and it's going to do a series of different use cases,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really know how much your users are going to use it, right? So if they start using it like crazy, and they're pumping a lot of documents in there. Let's say they're doing legal analysis of documents or project management
Yeah.
documents, or pumping in their source code, or what, I don't know, whatever your use case is. That could
Sure.
be a lot of token burn, and
Yeah.
it'll break your financial model, because your financial model is basically based on seat licensing and a fixed cost of overhead for your cloud services. Because they don't really increase dramatically. It's very sequential, right? You add a
Yeah.
user, you can kind of predict what your cloud cost would be to support that user or customer. With tokens,
Yeah.
one person could blow out their token usage just by
Yeah.
overusing it.
I mean, we've got clients that go through a couple million a day, right? So like
Yeah,
there's absolutely something there. And of course those are teams, but there might be a handful of, heavy users in there that kind of raise the spikes for everyone. But you did point out something I want to kind of touch on. So like this token economy that everyone's starting to learn, it's really from a company perspective, you're starting to really have to understand token efficiencies like you used to do with like cost efficiencies, right? So like that's just kind of a new way to understand your budgeting. But the good token spend is really like, is what I'm doing here like purposeful? Is it automated? Is there insight that I'm gaining from it? Bad token spend, I think, is there redundancy or unoptimized prompting? Are the workflows unrefined? Because if they are and they're super complex and it doesn't need to be that way, I mean, like you said, you're just kind of burning or wasting tokens along that chain that could be used in a more efficient way.
yeah. There's a lot of efficiencies and thoughtfulness that has to be put into when you build out your systems, right? So there's actually like it can get actually really complicated when you start to think about all the different ways that you have to think about tokens and usage. So the first one is, as a company, if you're deploying AI and you're releasing it in the wild, especially if you're building AI products or solutions internally, like let's say, for example, you have dev teams that are building on some things.
Yeah.
You know, you can have this kind of scenario where you have 50 or 60 different projects, if you're a large company, or even if you're not, starting to burn tokens. And so your token burn is out of control because you're not necessarily monitoring it and you're not necessarily providing best practices, or you don't have a command and control system, right? So,
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons why we incorporated that component inside of Rhea as a command and control platform to deploy agents, was that a company can monitor all the token usage and have it all in one place, and you can set restrictions so that you don't have this issue where Jim signs up on his company credit card and expenses his token usage and signs up for like Grok or Gemini or whatever, OpenAI,
Right.
and builds a little application that starts uploading 50, 60 documents a day into a high reasoning model. And next thing you know, his token bill is, maybe it's not crazy. Maybe it's like $800, but it's like we talk about this all the time. It's like that. We all had that experience with if you have a son or a daughter, and, back in the day, or, that where you wake up and you have maybe they bought a bunch of gaming, things on their phone. You get a phone bill, it's like $800. Like, what the heck happened? Oh, I bought a bunch of Candy Crunch things or whatever. Or back in my day,
Candy Crush.
back in my day, it was like phone bill. Like you would.
Well, no, I mean, my first cell phone came out of a bowling alley game. We
Right.
Thomas Hall, our head of product here at Rhea, we were there bowling one night with some friends, and literally it was one of those stacker games that you go back and forth. And I got a Virgin Mobile brick, and it was $2.99 to buy Super Mario theme for my ringtone. But every text was anywhere from 10 to 25 cents.
Yeah, there we
depending
go.
on the time
usage. Yeah.
So there I am ripping through text, not even thinking about it. And as a teenager, working a part-time job, getting a bill for $70 was how will I financially recover?
Right.
That's kind of where we are with these models. Is you start to if you don't reel it in, you don't understand how these tokens all fit in. You absolutely could have somebody saying, well, of course I want the work to be the most efficient, so let me give the smartest model this work to do. And then there you are on not just a couple $100, maybe a couple $1,000 if you're really ripping
or
through.
or you accidentally just tie it into a database or into a document store that has you didn't tweak your code, or you didn't really look at it, and you let it run overnight and it processes 5,000 documents, even though it was only supposed to process 5, right? So you can fall into a trap. And I would put that in the category of just, understanding that you have to put some controls in play so that you can manage your budget. Now, all that in the context of spending tokens isn't necessarily bad, because
no, it means that work's getting done if you're doing it efficiently.
Yeah, token usage it equates to productivity. You just want to make sure you maximize your productivity. I mean, we wrote a white paper around the idea of future work, right? And so it's a little obtuse, and it's a little bit like projective mindset of all right, well, where are we headed as a society if AI is starting to do more work? And it's not a crazy thought to say AI is going to consume. I wouldn't say it's going to.
I don't know, Rich. We're kind of batting 1,000 when it comes to some of our obtuse and crazy thoughts so far.
I'm Nostradamus for sure. But it comes down to, people always say things like, "Oh, it's going to replace a job," and I don't think that's the right. And then that statement right there shows somewhat of the naivete, if you don't mind me speaking French. I'm not even sure it's French. Naivete of somebody going, "Oh, AI equals job," which is not actually true. So you actually have to break the job into more granular components of productivity. And if you think of a job as productivity and a set of workflows, the human will always be somewhere in one of those, in some port of that workflow, either at the beginning to trigger it, at the end to verify it was done, or in the middle to approve. So when you think of a job, you almost have to kind of recalibrate a job as a work of productivity, like a set of productive workflows. And then within that productivity, there's human and AI. And so what you should be thinking about as a company is, okay, it's not about replacing jobs, it's about replacing productivity. And you're taking AI and bringing it into the fold and saying, okay, well, let's just say a high level. In this white paper, we kind of talk about a human versus AI.
Yeah.
And Steve Jobs makes this amazing analogy, when he first started Apple, about the most efficient, how humans are more efficient than most other creatures because of ingenuity. And he talks about a human on a bicycle being more efficient than a condor, because condor, if you take the human out of the equation, the condor is the most efficient animal. It can go the furthest distance with the least amount of energy used,
Energy spent.
except for but then you take a human with a bicycle, next thing you know, you're killing the condor. So I kind of equate the same thing. A human with a bicycle is like a human with AI, where you can now have scenarios where the token usage, you get a massive lift with AI versus a human, because at the end of the day, you could measure a human's work productivity in tokens. And I do think, and I pose that in this white paper because it's a different mindset of how you can incorporate AI into your company. And it's also a different measurement that maybe the workforce might move toward, especially knowledge workers. You can't, obviously, a plumber would be hard to measure in tokens, but
but a support team member that's answering X amount of tickets, and the ticket is average this many tokens, like that's a KPI you can kind of break down.
Or a developer or a salesperson, pretty much any knowledge worker. You could say, all right, well, Jim over here, he inputs, let's call it 100,000 tokens a month, right? He's in meetings, he's listening to conversations, he's reading, he's, and he's outputting, let's say 200,000 tokens a month. Maybe he's building out, workflows or documents or whatever it might be.
Yeah, he's doing work. Yeah.
So, but, over here you have the human who has a certain cost and their output is 300,000 tokens. And then over here you have the AI and it's doing 30, 40 million tokens. So you can, but you can't necessarily compare the two, because over here there's a lot more ingenuity and there's a lot of components here that AI can't do. And over here, you have the luxury of compute, and it's 24/7. It can go scale pretty without limitations. Whereas humans have families, they want to go play with their kids and so forth. But if you
and that's kind of that silver lining that we've talked about before, right? Like, we're in the glass half full, which is like, at some point now you're kind of you're returning back to more of a human element.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to be in like the absolute grind 24/7. Yes, there are roles where AI is going to make you more efficient with your time and you can get more work done there. So maybe there's an increase, but it's still, I can unplug at 5 and go home, and I did a lot more in that day versus like, I'm gonna have to unplug at 8.
That's and I think that's the paradigm shift that we talk about, which is simply, and I think if the context of this was communicated better to companies and employees, they would think of AI completely different. They wouldn't think of it like, oh my God, it's gonna take my job. You think of it as an employer saying, all right, everybody, we're now going to measure productivity, not in tokens, like whatever, use whatever word you want to use, but it's easy to understand, right? Output of words, right? Now, intelligence is behind it, right? And obviously humans have a different type of intelligence than the AI, but at the end of the day, output is output, input is input, and we're going to kind of compare it. And so as a human, as an employee over here, if they're talking, let's say, to a support rep or a developer, they're saying, all right, well, how much lines of code have you produced? And they go, well, I produced, 100,000 lines of code. Okay, well, let's call that, or 10,000 lines of code. Okay, let's call that 100,000 tokens because of the number of words, right? And then over here we say, how much can the AI produce? And it can produce, literally unlimited amount of, as long as it's being prompted correctly. But you combine the two, right? Peanut butter and jelly, that thing. Then now you have humans plus AI. So now the output of this human is not 100,000 tokens. It's 1 million or 10 million tokens. So so now you compare apples to apples. You're saying, okay, over here, developer A not using AI, 100,000 tokens. Developer B using AI, 10 million tokens. And so now I would be looking at that going, all right, I'm getting way more productivity out of human plus AI here. And and that should be how maybe potentially in the future they're compensated. So it's kind of, it does two things. It rewards people for using the best tools. And it also level sets the idea that it's not about your job going away. It's about your job being more productive, more efficient.
How valuable are you now to the company?
Right.
Because
if you were it sounds kind of all obtuse and maybe crazy because all this AI stuff is new, but let's just go back in time where you had the first personal computer, right? And let's say
Mm-hmm.
you ran an accounting office, right? And Sally over here is still doing the old, writing the
Ledger
ledger
and
on a
mhm.
graph paper, and then over here somebody has Excel, right? And he's
Mm-hmm.
just dragging and dropping columns, and it's never wrong. And over here, the paper, you're like, I'm not even sure that she added this correctly. Somebody has to go and double check it. And
Mm-hmm.
you come in as a boss and go, okay, hey guys, Jim over here is on Excel, and he's doing 5 to 10x the work you guys are doing over here. And
Yeah,
everyone over
manually.
here is like, no, I don't trust Excel. I like the good old fashioned lead and paper. I don't
Yeah.
know what this computer is doing. It's all witchcraft, and
Yeah.
I
Magic and
don't trust it. I
electricity.
don't trust it. I don't trust that it's
Yeah.
on this machine. What happens if the machine breaks? And all these things that people, all the fear and uncertainty and doubt come out.
Sure.
But is there anybody using graph paper anymore? No, of course not. So, and of course, all the
Mm-hmm.
Sallys that never started using computer and learning Excel were out of work, right?
Sure.
And it's not because AI took their job or replaced them. It's
Or a
because they
computer did in that
refused to
sense. Yeah.
evolve, really. I mean,
Yeah.
and what's
Well,
scary is AI is so much easier to evolve into because it's human. I mean, it's human like, right? So we're
yeah,
not asking
it's
everybody
not
to learn
disruptive to
like
our
some
process.
crazy complicated thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, just talk to it. It's lonely.
Yeah.
Just bring it in,
No.
train it, tell it what you want it to do, and just start using it and go from outputting 100,000
Mm-hmm.
tokens a month to 10 million tokens a month, which equates to productivity, which equates to value to your company and growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things you pointed out, which is important, is this consolidation fear that might be out there is more of the strategy, in the sense of it's less about consolidating the humans on a team, but really like, are there certain things in our day, in our work, maybe the tools that we're currently paying for, right? Can I consolidate and get away from tool fatigue, knowing that all of these SaaS things that, again, were meant to help you, that ended up taking more of your time, can now be, consolidated down into an orchestrated AI layer, or having that along the workflow and letting AI kind of do those pieces. Because now, to your point, Sally doesn't have to get up to speed and become, extremely tech centric around all these different things. It's like, engage with your
Yeah.
AI that can utilize the things that are out there and continue to do your job, but just do it at a more streamlined process.
Yeah. I think it's if you were talking about business transformation and you're talking about, all these CEOs that read all these fancy books or go to these big, big five firms like E&Ys, and they talk about, oh man,
Mm-hmm.
and they come pontificate, and I which never really falls and never really correlates to
No.
anything actionable. But I think there's an interesting, if you are in a leadership role, even if you're not the CEO, but if you're running an organization, I think there is an interesting transformation that you can get ahead of here, which is, for the first time, because we think about SaaS, right? Think about software investment that most companies make,
Mm-hmm.
and they, like you said, they put all this energy and time and money into building out having all this software, right? Salesforce or whatever it might be, and you're putting all this data in, but there's no real measurement of ROI there. It's always obtuse, right? It's like, oh, I think it's working. I mean, I know it's, at least we have all our stuff in one place, but then you're like, what am I getting out of this,
Yeah.
right? It's very asymmetric of value proposition. But now you can actually say, all right, forget about software as like this must have, because, I don't want to go back to paper and pencil, but more of,
Right.
if you kind of shift your mindset into productivity, and now we have this, and you have something to measure it against for the first time. If you embrace the kind of AI is the future mindset, you're
Right.
now saying to your employees, actually, in a weird way, you're saying, hey, if you don't burn 10 million tokens a month, which is a minimal amount of money, it's less than licensing fees, I'll put it that way. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't burn 10 million tokens a month, then something's wrong. And if I
Mm-hmm.
was, looking at it from a company perspective, whether it be developers, support, sales, or whatever it might be, they all have different use cases, but they all have the basic same measurement tools. Like, if you're not burning through 10
Mm-hmm.
million tokens, then you're not using AI. You're not being productive. You don't have the efficiency that I demand for us to be competitive in this new world.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's a mind shift. It's like, oh shoot, okay, I got to hit that that's my KPI now. My KPI
Mm-hmm.
isn't, necessarily solely based on kind of your core business KPIs. I need to figure out how to adapt and adopt AI. And now it puts people thinking, all right, well, how can I burn through those tokens? Well, I can create some AI agents that are on my team that are going to automate and become autonomous and maybe do some things like, crunch through meetings, analyze meetings, build up stand-up meetings for developers or process support tickets, whatever.
Generate scopes of work,
And then, or I'm using tools, right? I'm summarizing, I'm creating new documents, I'm building out project plans through AI, and that's burning tokens. So there's a lot of ways to burn tokens, but what you're doing is you're being more productive, and you're thinking strategically about how to incorporate AI in your day-to-day. And I do think that it's going to change the way that companies have to budget and price the world in the future on this usage-based pricing. Everything is a utility now. But it's also going to be this interesting transformation on how they measure productivity, both human versus AI and human plus AI. And I think ultimately that if you can grasp that and you can start to implement things in your business that kind of think through how that transforms how your workers and how your people think, that I think it's a better communication mechanism and a reward system. And it's also it also will accelerate adoption, because it's going to kind of basically make this new bar, this new requirement. And when you point blank if you put a picture in front of your team and say, this is you, and this is you on AI, like that old drug, not as bad as like the whole frying pan cocaine thing, but like, although I do sometimes when I'm like on OpenAI, like in a zone,
when you're ripping
I
through
feel
it,
I feel like I did a bump of coke, where not that I've ever done a bump of coke, but I'm saying I'm cranking, like AI is just building it for me. And I'm like, look here, I did a 30-page paper in 3 minutes. But like, there's something to be said there. Like, where you show a picture of you and say like, hey guys, like, what you used to be thought of as a hard worker, and your output was off the charts, but now you have a subpar worker or even a new employee that doesn't know anything, and they're cranking with AI, and they're just kind of leaving you in the dust.
Closes a serious gap there for sure.
Yeah. And so I think that's a great way to budget it. It's like, everybody gets 10 million tokens. You have to use it. That's good productivity. If anybody's burning through 100 million tokens, I really need to understand why, because that might be bad token usage, because they might be, not using it in the right way. But you just set the tone that way. And then you go back to your SaaS providers and you tell them to pound sand. And because, they don't, I mean, to some degree, like they're becoming a system of record. They're not being used, and they tell them, I want to use your APIs, and I just want to go into your products cold with my AI agents and start reducing seat licensing. I mean, that's what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So every SaaS provider is going to have to come to the table with something completely agentic, something fresh, and reimagine how they're going to survive this shift from seat licensing or whatever other pricing models that might exist into a usage-based model. And that transition is going to happen so fast, so much faster than
I think that's the 2026. Like, we'll have it in a couple episodes. We're going to talk about like our 2026 big board of the things we think might happen, right? And I think that's going to be one of the major pillars in the AI space. Q1, Q2 is really this tokenomics, shift for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's not something that's like it's baked in to the infrastructure of how AI works, because it's all about compute and energy. And so AI is very much no different than like your electric bill, right? So some people have an electric bill that's $500, but they're okay with that because they have a mansion and they have like 30 TVs and a jacuzzi. And then some people freak out when their electric bill's at $50 because all they have is like a toaster and a...
We're in Florida. We haven't seen a $50 electric bill in a long time.
And then that's the other thing to think about too. Like, I know this is like really obtuse, but like, what happens when... I mean, maybe this is more relevant to people in California because they experience it, but what happens when AI usage starts to creak, right? And then and electricity, right, becomes more expensive. It's going to be
more expensive
because it's being sucked in by all the AI, right? And then so obviously that's why a lot of these...
Well, that's a topic on like nuclear and things.
So I mean, we've
seen some really good.
So I mean, it's expect usage,
clean energy, all that.
Yeah, expect usage to go up in cost. However, if you put it to use and you make it and you equate it to productivity and you get your humans using it to be more productive, you can turn one human resource into the capacity of 10.
3 to 5.
It's still going to be way, way, way cheaper. Token usage is not necessarily going to break the bank. human resources is breaking the bank. Really, at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you know, people's payrolls are going to be are high if they're not using AI. But you take that same team, you give them AI. Now you're working, instead of 10 people doing the work, you're doing the work of 100. So
Yep.
that math always will come up. You'll always come out ahead.
Yeah, good stuff, man. Well, for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
AI takes the floor.